A student's overview of the Ageless wisdom was carefully compiled from the following books by Alice A. Bailey. A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Esoteric Psychology, Volumes 1 and 2. Esoteric Healing. Esoteric Astrology. The Rays and the Initiations. Students are encouraged to download the free PDF version of this overview by following the link in the video's description, or to order a printed copy at cost from thebookpatch.com, but are advised to read the original, unabridged books in order to gain deeper insight into the ageless wisdom. Students are also invited to join our online study group at facebook.com/groups/students of the ageless wisdom. Chapter 42 Esoteric Psychology Volume 2. The Techniques of Integration, Fusion and Duality. It might be of value here if I pointed out to you that the three words, integration, fusion and duality, when dealt with, as they are, in connection with the final stages of the path of evolution, are significantly different. For one thing, it might be said that 1. The technique of integration, a sevenfold technique, is applied upon the path of probation. 2. The technique of fusion is applied upon the path of discipleship. 3. The technique of duality is applied upon the path of initiation. Integration here refers to the bringing into one field of resultant magnetic activity of 5 types of energy. 1. Physical and emotional sentient energy. 2 energies therefore are brought together and eventually form one expressive force. 2. Physical, emotional sentient and mental energy, 3, are also brought into relationship. One potent vortex of force is then set up, which eventually becomes so systematized and integrated that we call its aggregated expression personality. 4. And in time this aggregate becomes a realized potency and thus completes the fourfold lower man. 3. These 4 types of energy are then brought into relationship with the ego or soul. This brings then into play another and higher type of energy expression, and thus the 5 energies integrate, blend and fuse. The technique of fusion deals with the production of a close interplay of the 5 above enumerated aspects of energy which have been, in due time, integrated into a unity. It is really a fusion of the 4 forces and the 1 energy. This fusion produces 4. A demonstration of personality activity when, in response to the technique of integration, there is response and interplay between the threefold lower man. A gradual emergence of the dominant note of the lower man which will, in time, indicate the nature of the personality ray. The quality of the personality ray, in its higher aspects, emerges into living expression. Great beauty of character or great forcefulness will then appear. Gradually, the qualities of the personality energy are transmuted into those of the ego or soul, and the fusion of the 2 energies, soul and body, is then complete. This technique of fusion might be better understood by all of you if it were called the technique of transmutation, but it must be remembered that the transmutation referred to is not that of bad qualities into good or of bad characteristics into good ones, for this should take place quite definitely upon the path of probation, but the transmutation of the higher aspects of the personality ray into those of the soul. When this has been to a great extent carried forward satisfactorily, then the technique of duality comes into play, a duality differing greatly from that to which we refer when we speak of the higher and lower selves. It is a duality which is utilized upon the path of initiation by those who know no sense of separativeness, and signifies one wherein the transmuted and purified personality qualities and characteristics are used by the initiate in the three worlds for service and the furthering of the plan. End of page 218. The man who will seek to use the technique of fusion is the disciple who is conscious of personality power, owing to the fact that his mind is beginning to dominate his sentient emotional nature, much in the same way as his emotional sentient nature has, for ages, controlled his physical body. The use of the mind is becoming second nature to certain advanced types of men, and it is called into play, when they reach this stage, almost automatically. The result is that the integration of the three energies is proceeding fast. At the same time, the man is definitely oriented to soul contact and knowledge, and frequently the mind, when it is the controlling personality factor, is itself brought suddenly and dynamically under the control of the soul. This accounts for the intense difficulty of the life of every disciple at this stage. Several processes are simultaneously going on. 1. The mind factor is steadily becoming more dominant, increasingly clarified and usable. 2. The three aspects of the lower nature are working in closer unity all the time, each growing at the same time in individual potency. 3. The personality ray is making its presence felt, and the expressed power of the man, within his environment, is equally increasing. 4. The soul ray is, at times, projecting itself, and this produces in the early stages those difficult upsets and turmoils which are usually of a distressing kind. It is at this stage therefore that the technique of fusion can profitably be used, preserving at the same time the realized integrity of the motive which, if correctly apprehended, should be 1. The motive of a realized objective of soul control in response to a living reaction to its sensed pull/call. 2. The motive of service, in response to a sentient realization of humanity's need. 3. The motive of cooperation with the plan, in response to an intelligent appreciation of its nature and existence. Again, you will note that we have swung back to our three major themes: soul control, service, the plan. This technique of fusion evokes these three qualities in relation to the soul, to service and to the plan. At the same time, it brings illumination to the mind, thus revealing the soul and the kingdom of God. It brings increased imagination, creative and dynamic, to the emotional sentient nature, the astral body, thus revealing relationship and responsibility. It brings likewise inspiration to the physical life, to the physical body, via the brain, revealing actual capacity to cooperate intelligently with the plan. Therefore, we shall have to consider a technique which will do three things. 1. Bring illumination, through the evocation of the will or first aspect of divinity. 2. Bring imagination, through the evocation of love, the second aspect or of sentient response to the world soul in all forms. 3. Bring inspiration, through the evocation of the intelligence, the third aspect. 7 ray approaches to fusion. The first ray technique must, therefore, do the following things and produce the following results. 1. The divine will must be evoked, of which the mind aspect is the reflection, and the brain, or the phenomenal appearance, the shadow. This brings into functional activity upon the physical plane what is called in theosophical books, Atma, or the first qualified differentiation of the monadic life. The quality is often called the spiritual will. 2. The evocation of this will produces an illumination of the mind, differing from the illumination achieved through ordinary meditation and about which much has been written in the mystical books. This latter illumination is essentially the evocation of the intuition, which brings the illumination of direct knowledge to the mind. The one to which I here refer is, symbolically speaking, related to the state of consciousness of the Creator when he sent forth the phenomena producing fiat, "Let there be light." End of page 219. 3. This illumination, coming from the highest aspect which man can conceive, follows a direct line of approach, or pours down through a direct channel from a. the level of Atma, or that center of spiritual will which is dynamic and effective but seldom called into play, to the will petals of the egoic lotus, upon which I touched in a treatise on cosmic fire. These petals are the reflection in the soul of this particular aspect of energy. b. From this layer of petals to the mind-body. c. From the mind-body to the brain. d. From the brain, in due and set time, to the center at the base of the spine, thus arousing the Kundalini fire. It will interest students to note how the first-ray disciple, when employing this first-ray technique of fusion, ends by producing second-ray characteristics of which illumination, producing understanding, love and sympathetic cooperation, is the predominant note. The second-ray disciple, through rightly applied technique, produces curiously enough, third-ray results, of which the use of the creative imagination is the outstanding characteristic. The third-ray disciple, through the development of the power to inspire, adds to his innate qualities certain definitely first-ray potencies. All are, however, subordinated to the second-ray nature of the divine expression in this solar system. The technique of fusion, employed by the second-ray disciple, will produce the following results. 1. Increased sentient response to the world soul and to the environment in which the disciple finds himself will increasingly be achieved. 2. This is largely done through the cultivation of the creative imagination. This is one of the great building attributes of deity. It is brought about by the evocation of the love nature and, as earlier noted, brings in soul power in full tide. In the world of phenomenal appearance, the soul is the creating agent, the major building factor, the constructor of forms, and, through the technique of fusion, the power to imagine or to use imaginative thought power, in conjunction with the faculty to visualize, to wish, to dream into being, is definitely and scientifically developed. 3. This creative tension or one-pointed focus of imaginative dreaming swings the astral body into complete subordination to the soul. The soul is in complete control, no sense of separativeness is again possible. 4. The channel through which this synthesizing and creative energy pours down is as follows. A. From the monad to the love petals of the egoic lotus. B. From these love petals to the astral vehicle, energizing all astral matter found in the equipment of the phenomenal man. The Spirit of God moves upon the face of the waters. C. From thence to the solar plexus center. D. From that center to the heart center. The needed duality connected with the astral body thus appears. We have here also a correspondence to the descent of the fire of the will to the base of the spine with its subsequent raising, along the spinal column, to the head. The third ray disciple, employing the technique of fusion, finds that 1. It evokes a full functioning of the divine creative faculty. It will be apparent at this point how important is motive, for it determines the line of activity and differentiates man's activity into what is called, by esotericists, black and white magic. It is interesting also to note that it is the very rare man indeed who swings into the field of so-called black magic. This indicates, does it not, my brother, the extraordinarily triumphant work of the Great White Lodge? 2. The fiat which initiated this creative activity, as far as it relates to man, has been inadequately couched in the words, "Let the earth bring forth abundantly," thus inaugurating the age of creativity. This creative fecundity has steadily shifted during the past few thousand years into the creation of those effects of which ideas are the cause, producing within the creative range of man's mind a. That which is useful and so contributing to man's present civilization. b. That which is beautiful, thus gradually developing the aesthetic consciousness, the sense of color, and the recognition of the use of symbolic forms in order to express quality and meaning. End of page 220. 3. As a result of the disciples' use of this technique, there is brought about an increased vital livingness, and a dynamic inflow of spiritual life into the physical plane experience. The disciple becomes inspired by the fire of love, and this evokes the service of creation as an expression of that love. 4. The power which inspires him and which makes him dynamic and creative in his environment comes likewise from the will aspect of the monad, sweeping the higher mind into activity upon the higher mental level, which is that on which the creative ideas of God emerge in form to be recognized by the human consciousness. 5. The channel of approach or of downflow is as follows. A. From the will aspect of the monadic life to that level of consciousness and of energy which we call that of the higher mind. B. From the higher mind to the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus. C. From these vortexes of force to the lower or concrete mind, that in which the average intelligent man familiarly works, to the throat center, and from thence immediately to the sacral center, the center of physical plane creation or reproduction. From there it is raised again to the throat center, where the creative physical urge is transmuted into artistic or literary creation in some form or another, and later still into the power to create groups or organizations which will express some idea or some thought which emanates from the mind of God, and which demands immediate precipitation upon earth. The result of this inflow of supremely high energies is that the processes set in motion by the technique of integration are completed, and the rays of the lower man are welded or fused into the personality ray. This itself is later blended with the egoic ray, enabling that spiritual identity which we recognize as standing behind phenomenal man to work through both these rays, thus bringing about a correspondence to that grouping within the divine expression which we call the major and minor rays. The rays of the triple lower nature then form one single avenue through which the soul, and later the energy of spirit, can contact the larger whole in manifestation upon the physical, astral and mental planes. Now let us for a moment consider the technique of fusion. The keynotes of the three techniques are as follows. First ray, isolated unity. Second ray, inclusive reason. Third ray, presented attributes. The first thing the disciple who seeks to use these techniques undertakes is to arrive at an understanding, practical, experimental and subjective, of the appropriate phrase for his ray. Let me paraphrase or elucidate each of them, inadequately perforce owing to the lack of comprehension and the limited evolution of the average disciple, but in any case in order to bring suggestion to your minds. Isolated unity is that stage of consciousness which sees the whole as one and regards itself, not theoretically but as a realized fact, as identified with that whole. It is a whole which is isolated in the consciousness of the man, and not the man himself who regards himself as isolated. The word isolated refers to that complete organized organism of which the man can feel and know himself to be a part. The word unity expresses his relationship to the whole. It will be apparent therefore that this whole is something progressively realized. For the bringing about of this progressed realization, the great expansions of consciousness, called initiations, have been temporarily arranged as a hastening or forcing process. This progression of realized isolations in unity may begin with the disciple's group, environment or nation and, through right use of the understanding, will end by enabling him to isolate the whole divine scheme or living structure, and to identify himself with it in an active, capable manner. End of page 221. The result of meditation upon this theme will be 1. A definite illumination of the mind, for it will then be at one with the universal mind and all the ways of God, and the plans of God will stand revealed to him. 2. The creative imagination will be powerfully evoked in response to this revelation, and modes and methods of cooperation will be sentiently developed, and the disciple will become a creative cooperator and not just an obedient servant of the plan. 3. His life will be then inspired by the desire to serve humanity and to cooperate with the custodians of the plan. This will bring in the full tide of soul life, producing temporarily a violent conflict between the personality ray and the soul ray, but also producing a steady subordination of the lower to the higher, of the minor to the major. End of chapter 42.